Hello and welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Prelims Powerplay. If you watched yesterday's video, in that video I explained to you that we are going to cover the entire year's current affairs through this Prelims Powerplay series. And we have divided the entire year's current affairs into subjects. Okay, so these are subject segregated current affairs. Now today is lecture number 1 and we are going to begin with Prelims Powerplay Economics lecture series. I explained it to you in the yesterday's video. If not, well, go and watch that video again. The link to that video is in the description section. Okay, so do watch that video again. So today we are going to begin with Prelims Powerplay Economics session, and entire year's economics current affairs would be covered in a few lectures. So today is lecture number 1. Okay, so let's begin because time is of the essence now for you guys. Prelims is round the corner. It's not that far anymore. It's like a few days far. That is why time is of the essence. So let's quickly jump into the lecture. I won't bother you or bore you with further introduction. Okay, so let's begin today's discussion. Prelims Powerplay Economics section. Now, I told you that we have divided the entire year's current affairs into subjects. Okay, so in this lecture series, we will cover economics current affairs. And the entire year's economics current affairs are divided into these topics, these 7 topics. Topic number 1 is economic growth and development, which shall be covered today. Okay, topic number 2 is banking and finance. Topic number 3 is fiscal policy. Topic number 4 is budget. Well, we all know budget is important. Topic number 5 is external sector. Topic number 6 is agriculture. And topic number 7 is industry and infrastructure. So we have divided the entire year's economics current affairs into these 7 topics. Today is the turn for economic growth and development. So let's start discussing important news items, important current affairs with respect to economic growth and development. Now, within this topic of economic growth and development, there are 8 news items or 8 current affairs, which we are going to cover. So we will start discussion on those 8 important news items, current affairs. But first, let's take a look at what are these 8 important news items which have been categorized into this topic of economic growth and development. So what are the subtopics for today's lecture? Okay, so in today's lecture, we will cover second advance estimates of GDP which were released in February this year. So we'll talk about this. Then we'll talk about gross domestic knowledge product. It was talked about in the news. Then we'll talk about Quacquarelli-Simons rankings, QS rankings with respect to India. Okay, many countries are ranked. So we'll talk about these rankings. Then we'll talk about very important household consumption expenditure survey. Its data was released recently. Then there was this article with respect to stagnant rural wages. Rural wages have been pretty much stagnant. So what are the implications of that? Then impact of food inflation. Then electric vehicles versus agriculture. This is a fascinating topic that we'll cover today. And in the end, we'll talk about India's informal economy. So we are going to discuss these 8 topics, okay, one by one. Clear? Now, before starting discussion on these 8 topics, let me tell this to you in advance, okay? Hear me out carefully. The thing is, we are covering these current affairs from the perspective of prelims examination. So a lot of information that was covered in these articles in the newspaper would be ignored because that information is important from the perspective of mains examination. But we are wholeheartedly now focusing on prelims because prelims is not that far. It's around the corner. Not many days are left. And I'm sure some of you might be panicking. So therefore, we will ignore useless information and we will only focus on important information, important from the perspective of prelims this year. Okay, so remember, we are not going to delve that deep into each and every topic. We are only going to cover whatever is important from the perspective of prelims. Okay, all right. Now that we have that out of the way, let's start today's lecture with topic number 1, which is second advance estimates. Second advance estimates. Now look, this topic is about GDP calculation. You all know about GDP, gross domestic product, and government of India calculates GDP. But the thing with GDP is, and hear me out carefully, that it takes a lot of time to calculate 1 year's GDP. It takes a lot of time. Yes, it is a very hectic job. You have to gather data from so many sectors, so many industries. Therefore, it takes a lot of time to come out with exact data regarding India's GDP for 1 year. Now, the thing is that government also comes out with various advance estimates. Now, what do we understand by the term advance estimates of GDP? The thing is, let's suppose government wants to calculate this year's GDP, okay? But only 6 months have passed. Now, government wants to make an estimate about what the GDP would be for the entire year. But the problem is that only 6 months have passed and the government has data for only first 6 months. So government is going to make a projection based on the data provided by these first 6 months. Okay, so government is going to make an estimation that entire year's GDP is going to be this much based on our analysis of first 6 months. Now, when government comes out with such an estimate, it is known as advance estimate. Okay, so advance estimates of GDP are premature estimates because the entire year's data has not come out. Now, once this year gets completed, once this year is over, the entire 12 months are over, then government has data for the entire 12 months. Then the government is going to revise its earlier estimates, earlier advance estimates, right? Those are going to be called revised estimates. Okay, so you will hear these terms, advance estimates and revised estimates, right? So government is going to revise its earlier projections because government now has advanced data. Government now has proper data, right? Now, a few months later, government will have more data. Then government is going to revise its earlier revised estimate, and that will be known as second revised estimates. So government keeps on revising its GDP estimates, right? Advanced estimates, remember, are premature estimates, whereas revised estimates are, well, revision of the previous estimates based on new data, right? You understood that part? Okay. Now clearly focus, okay? Because I will be covering or I will be making you understand this entire topic of second advance estimates from scratch, right? From the very beginning, I'll be covering important basics because MCQs are asked on those important basics. Okay? So hear me out carefully. Give me your 100% attention. All right. So second advance estimates. Now listen, GDP is calculated for the entire year. Yes? Now in financial terms, year is a little different. Okay, there are two types of years. Calendar year. I'm sure most of you know this already. Financial year. Or some call it fiscal year. Okay. The year begins on 1st January and ends on 31st December. We all know about it. We all celebrate New Year's, right? But financial year is a little different. Fiscal year is a little different. It starts on 1st April. You all know this, I'm sure. And ends on 31st March of next year, right? That is why whenever we are calculating GDP or government is coming out with its estimates, government is talking about financial year and financial year is always mentioned like the previous financial year was 2024-25 because it began on 1st April 2024 and ended on 31st March 2025. The current financial year which has already begun is known as financial year 2025-26. Okay? Out carefully. This 2024-25 is also written as FY, which stands for financial year 25. This 2025-26 is also written as FY, which stands for financial year 26. So if you will hear or read the term FY25, that means 2024-25. If you hear about the term FY26, 2025-26. Simple? Clear? Okay, let's move forward. So GDP is estimated for financial years. All right. Now the thing is, for GDP estimation, the entire year is divided into 4 quarters. So let's talk about the previous financial year, which was financial year 2025. It was divided into 4 quarters. Each quarter is 3 months. So quarter number 1 is from April to June. Quarter number 2 is from July to September. Quarter number 3 is from October to December. And quarter number 4 is, well, simply put, from January to March. Right? Now, our country estimates annual GDP figures also, quarterly GDP figures also, which measure the entire economic output for 1 quarter. So, India measures annual GDP for the entire year, quarterly GDP for the entire quarter. Okay? Now, hear me out carefully. Now, let's talk about financial year 2025, which is 2024-25. The thing is that in January 2025, first advance estimates came out with respect to GDP of this year. Okay? First advance estimates. Now, first advance estimates means because the year would end on March, but this first advance estimates are coming on, well, January 2025. So the entire data is not available with the government. That is why we call them advance estimates. And these first advance estimates are based on the data of first quarter and second quarter. So based on the data of first quarter and second quarter, government makes a projection about the entire year's GDP. This is known as first advance estimates. Then in February, government comes out with second advance estimates. By that time, data for quarter 3 also comes out. So government can make a better projection. So second advance estimates are an improvement upon first advance estimates for a very simple reason, because data for quarter 3 comes out. Clear? Yes? Then this entire year will end on 31st March 2025. After the end of this entire financial year, in May this year, okay, because the entire data for all 12 months have come out, now the government will come out with revised estimates. Okay, because all data is available for 12 months. This is known as first revised estimates, and so on and so forth. You need to be clear about these things. You need to be familiar with these terms: advanced estimates, revised estimates. Right? Make sense? Now, I have given you the entire background. Now let's talk about this news. Okay, so second advance estimates were released on February 2025. Let's talk about that. So estimates of GDP, as I've mentioned, first advance estimates are released in January, which contain the data for only quarter 1 and quarter 2. Second advance estimates, which are released on February 28th, contain data for quarter 1, quarter 2 and quarter 3 also, October, December. But the reason why they are called advance estimates is because data for quarter 4 is not available. Why? Because quarter 4 is not over yet, right? So these are second advance estimates, and second advance estimates were released recently. Okay. Now, what is so special about second advance estimates? Well, it contains data about quarter 3, so it's an improvement upon first advance estimates, plus first revised estimates of previous year also. Like first revised estimates, this is 2024-25, of 2023-24 are also released alongside second advance estimates, okay, of previous year, not the current year. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, not the current year, previous year, whose entire available. And second advance estimates are more reliable. Why? Because, well, recent data is available, right? Makes sense? Now, once this entire financial year is over, then in May 2025, for the entire 12 months, provisional estimates would be released. These are called PE. So remember, question might be asked. Provisional estimates of a financial year are released in May of next year. Okay. And then first revised estimates would be released in Feb of 2026, along with second revised estimates of next year. Yes, makes sense? So remember this part, they can create confusing MCQs with respect to this. Okay, so remember, first advance estimates of this current year are released in January, then second on Feb. In the second advance estimates, you contain data for quarter 3. You also contain data for first revised estimates of previous year. And then these are more reliable. Then when this entire year gets over on 31st March, in May, you give provisional estimates because provisional data for the entire 12 months is out. Then more data comes out, and then next year, along with second provisional estimates, second advance estimates of next year, you will release revised estimates. Make sense? Okay, clear? Now, what is so special about advance estimates? Because advance estimates give us data about 5 key things. Okay, what are those 5 key things? Number 1, it gives us data about nominal GDP and real GDP. Now, what is the difference between nominal and real GDP? Well, nominal GDP and real GDP are different because real GDP is nominal GDP adjusted for inflation. When you adjust nominal GDP with inflation, then you get real GDP. So through these advanced estimates, you get the figures for nominal GDP and real GDP both. Make sense? Remember, real GDP is nominal GDP adjusted for inflation. Simple. You also get data. By the way, why is nominal GDP important? Because you must have seen that we calculate fiscal deficit, right? And it is written sometimes as fiscal deficit is 3.5% of GDP, right? India's fiscal deficit is 3.5% of GDP. Which GDP? Nominal or real? So fiscal deficit is calculated as a percentage of nominal GDP. Remember this part always. They can ask you an MCQ on that. Okay, revenue deficit, all deficits are calculated as a percentage of GDP, nominal GDP. Clear? Then we also calculate per capita GDP. Now, what is per capita GDP? Well, per capita is GDP divided by population. Okay, so we get per person GDP. It basically reveals information about how GDP will be distributed. I mean, how an average person is getting the benefit of GDP. So per capita GDP is GDP divided by population. It's generally low for India. Okay. Then nature of growth slowdown, because in second quarter last year, our growth slowed down. So why did it slow down would be revealed in the data of quarter 3, and quarter 3 data comes in second advance estimates. So that is why it is important. And in second advance estimates, you get revised estimates of previous year. So the correct story of previous year with all the data would also be revealed. Right? So that is why this is important. Now, there was some more information with respect to second advance estimates, but we are going to ignore that because that is not important for your prelims examination. Okay? Make sense? Clear? Okay. So this was topic number 1. Now let's quickly shift to topic number 2, which is gross domestic knowledge product. Now you must have heard about, you did hear about GDP. We just talked about GDP, but there is this another thing that is being talked about. Gross domestic knowledge product. And the idea of gross domestic knowledge product comes from knowledge economy. Look, knowledge economy is different from traditional economy. How? Well, traditional economy is based on raw material, labor, capital, all these things. But knowledge economy is based on knowledge. How much knowledge you have, how qualified your laborers are they PhD holders, how qualified your AI professionals are, right? Now, in this new day and age, your economy is dependent on your knowledge base. And that is why it is important for you to calculate your knowledge economy, right? That is why in 2021, Niti Aayog floated this idea of gross domestic knowledge product, GDKP, right? But then it avoided that idea. It like done and dusted. It was not discussed anymore. And now recently in 2025, well, Ministry of Statistics is now thinking again about reviving this idea of gross domestic knowledge product, because the new economy is knowledge economy. Okay, so what is this knowledge economy? Let's talk about gross domestic knowledge product. Look, traditional economy, as I've just mentioned, is based on labor and capital. How many laborers you have, how much capital you have. But in this day and age, there are a lot many sectors in our economy that are dependent on knowledge. Okay, for example, AI. The contribution to India's GDP made by AI will depend on, do we have enough AI skilled people? Do we have enough AI chips available? Do we have enough AI knowledge base, research, development papers, patents, intellectual property, all these things, right? So this day and age is about knowledge. Okay, your economy is dependent upon your knowledge base. Okay, it also depends on the number of educational institutions you have. Make sense? So knowledge economy is important, and that is why Government of India is now thinking about estimating this knowledge base through GDKP. So Government of India is thinking that along with GDP figures, we will release GDKP figures. But for that, because measuring knowledge is a little different. Suppose I have good AI skills. How will you assign monetary value to that? Okay, how much AI skills do I have? 2 crore rupees worth AI skills, 4 crore rupees worth AI skills. You see my point? It is difficult to give a monetary value to your knowledge base. That is why estimating GDKP is a little different, and that is why government is holding meetings to discuss a way out in estimating GDKP. Okay, so what was in the news? So Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation had a session on conceptual framework of GDKP measurement. How to measure GDKP? GDKP would capture the knowledge economy as a metric to supplement GDP. So along with GDP, we will measure GDKP. Okay. GDKP would better capture the contributions of knowledge driven sectors. Okay. Contribution of AI, contribution of innovation, contribution of intellectual assets, patents, copyrights, all these things. Okay. Monetary contribution. Okay. Now, this idea was earlier floated by Niti Aayog in 2021. Okay. After a review by Niti Aayog in August 2021, the project was then shelved. So, Niti Aayog abandoned it. Now, this idea is being revived by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and they are holding discussion how to measure your knowledge base. Okay. The thing is, they are going to create satellite accounts. Now, you need to know what satellite accounts are. Okay. At present, your knowledge is measured by the expenditure done by you. Okay. So, for example, India has patents, which is called intellectual property rights. So, how much expenditure did you do to get this patent? Is calculated as gross fixed capital formation. It is estimated as your investment. Currently, knowledge is considered as investment, but we need to calculate it separately. Okay. So M. Mosby is exploring if a satellite account to measure the knowledge base of an economy can be worked out. So for example, they will create a tourism satellite account. So it will contain tourism sector's GDP and also the knowledge base of tourism sector, culture sector's GDP, and knowledge base of culture sector. So every sector in our GDP will have a parallel satellite account which will talk about its knowledge base and how this knowledge base is contributing towards what? The GDP, the output. Okay. So this is something that they are discussing. Not many questions can be asked with respect to this in your prelims examination. The only thing they can ask is that the idea of GDKP was first floated by Niti Aayog and it is now being discussed by MOSPI. Okay. Now you need to have some more information about knowledge economy. So let's talk about its definition. So knowledge economy is an economic system where knowledge and information are the primary drivers of growth. So your growth is not driven by laborers or capital. It is driven by the knowledge base of these laborers. Your research and development institutions, your educational institutions, all of this. It relies on intellectual capital rather than physical capital, raw material. Okay. Now, intellectual capital is human capital, how qualified and skilled your laborers, human resources are. Intellectual property, it depends on the level of innovation and technology in your country, how many labs you have. It depends on your internet connection also. Okay, information and communication technology, and how many specialists, graduates, postgraduates, PhD holders you have from these fields. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay, because these people drive innovation. So what is the situation of your STEM fields? Okay, knowledge economy, sectors of our economy that are dependent heavily on knowledge are software development, research, consulting, education sector, financial services, healthcare, IT. Clear? That's all you need to know as far as this topic is concerned. All right, now let's move on to third news item, which is QS rankings. Now what are QS rankings? Look, QS stands for Quacquarelli Simons. It is a consultancy group, private consultancy group in Australia, and it gives rankings to different countries based on their skill level. So how skilled people are in different countries, based on that, it gives you a ranking. So recently this QS came out with a set of rankings, and there was some good news for India in these rankings, and there was some bad news for India also in these rankings. But the dominant focus of these rankings was that India is very well prepared with respect to skills of 21st century. Okay, so let's talk about this QS rankings. Okay, so QS rankings. Now these were the rankings. The report was called Quacquarelli Simons QS World Future Skills Index 2025. Okay, and what is the performance of India in this? Now the thing is, QS, this organization, uses 4 indicators to measure the skill level of your country. Okay, first indicator is skills fit. Second indicator is academic readiness, as you can see over here. Just a second. Academic readiness. Third is future of work. Okay, and last is economic transformation, and then you get the overall ranking. So as you can see over here, in skills fit, India's rank is 37. In academic readiness, it is 26. In future of work, India's rank is second, just after United States. In economic transformation, it is 40th. And overall, India has secured 25th rank in these rankings. Okay. Now, this picture was tweeted by Prime Minister Modi. So that means India is really proud of these rankings. India secured 25th rank with respect to future skills. Now, let's talk about these 4 indicators. Okay. So first is future of work. Future of work basically measures India's job market, how well India's job market is ready to get absorbed in industries which require new skills. So how well the job market is prepared to meet the growing demand for digital, AI, green technologies. So is our labor pool skilled enough to get absorbed in these new technological frontiers? Okay, this is future of work. Then this is skills fit. This measures how well countries are equipping graduates with the skills that employers desire. Then academic readiness. Is your curriculum, your university curriculum, college curriculum, ready, or is your university curriculum, or does your university curriculum provide future skills, AI skills, and all these skills, right? And economic transformation. How these new skills are benefiting your GDP. Okay. Yeah, this is again from knowledge sector. That's it. Now, what has been India's performance in this? Well, India secured 25th rank in this category. Okay. And the thing is, within this category, the top 10 countries, which includes US, UK, Australia, Canada, okay, top 10 countries are called Future Skills Pioneer. And then from 11th to 30th, they are called Future Skills Contender. Okay, so top 10 countries are called Future Skills Pioneer and the remaining are called Future Skills Contender. So India belongs to this second category. Okay, now India's strengths as per this index are: India was second in future of work category, we just discussed. That's very proud. India's youth preparedness is good. India has large youth population and robust startup ecosystem position. India is third in the world when it comes to startup ecosystem. Then digital readiness. Alongside Mexico, India is one of the most ready nations to integrate talent into digital roles. But this survey or these rankings also revealed some weaknesses that India has. Okay, what are those weaknesses? Poor in skills fit category. So we are in future, we secured second rank in future of work indicator. But in skills fit, we secured 37th rank. And that was lower than many equivalent countries in the Asia Pacific region. So India is not performing well in that. Then when it comes to the skill level of our graduates and skill demanded by industrialists or employers, well, there is a huge gap. So our graduates or postgraduates are not that skill ready for these new jobs. That is a problem. And India spends very little on research and development. Okay, India's spending on research and development is 0.6% of GDP, which is less than the global average, which is 2.7%. So India does not spend that much on research and development, which is important, very important, if India really is serious about becoming a knowledge economy. Make sense? So this is topic number 3, and that's all you need to know as far as this topic is concerned. Okay, and now let's quickly shift our focus to household consumption expenditure survey. Okay, now household consumption expenditure survey basically is a survey done by Ministry of Statistics. Okay, Ministry of Statistics has a branch called National Statistical Office, NSO. Okay, they conduct this survey, and this survey basically reveals information with respect to, well, what are the goods and services that an average household is purchasing in urban India and rural India? What are the spending patterns? Are urban households spending more on food than rural households? Are urban households spending more on education than rural households? All this data is gathered by this survey. So let's talk about it and what were the results of this survey. Okay, so household consumption expenditure survey. Okay, now it is calculated by, remember this part, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, there is this office called National Statistical Office. So they do this survey, and so indirectly we can say MOSPI does this survey. Now, through this survey, we basically get to know, or we reveal data related to monthly per capita, that is per person expenditure. So this survey, HCES, calculates MPCE, monthly per capita expenditure of rural households, of urban households, of states, okay, different states also. So this is the purpose. And this is important. This data is also important because government calculates consumer price index, which measures inflation. Now, this index, consumer price index, is based on the data revealed by HCES. So HCES is important to create this index, which is important to measure inflation. HCES is also important for measuring poverty in India, right? So this survey is very important. It helps us estimating inflation. It helps us estimating poverty. Clear? Now, what were the key highlights of this survey? There has been a decline in urban-rural consumption difference. So earlier there used to be a lot of difference between the consumption expenditure done by urban households and rural households. Okay, urban households generally do a lot of expenditure as compared to rural households. This gap is narrowing. Okay, so this is good news, because that means we are successful in reducing rural-urban inequality. Okay, then average monthly per capita expenditure is on the rise across all household types in rural and urban areas. This is also good news. Why? That means Indians are becoming well off. More and more Indians are spending more, consuming more. That means they have more money, so they are spending more cash. That is good news, right? Then, at all India, Gini coefficient of consumption expenditure has declined for both rural and urban areas. Now you have to understand, what is Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient is a coefficient that measures inequality. Basically, Gini coefficient is a number between 0 to 1. If Gini coefficient is closer to 0, if it is less, that is good news, because that means society is becoming more equal. But if the number is increasing, going closer to 1, that is bad news, because society is becoming more unequal. So this survey says that Gini coefficient is declining. That means good news in both rural and urban areas. Okay. Plus, if we talk about India's geography, then this survey gives a fascinating picture. Okay. It says that when it comes to western states, northern states, and southern states, monthly expenditure has increased. It is more than national average. Okay. So Western India, Northern India, Southern India is doing better. Which region in India is not doing better? Well, eastern states, Bihar, Jharkhand, Northeast India, and central states, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, their monthly per capita expenditure is lower than national average. So Western, Northern, and Southern India is doing better than eastern central states. Remember this part. This is the geographical distribution of monthly per capita expenditure. By the way, an MCQ might be asked with respect to household expenditure. So there are different types of household expenditure. Some is fixed expenditure. So expenditure on food is fixed. Okay. Is irregular expenditure, expenditure on clothes, fuel, transportation, that is irregular. Okay. It is not fixed. And then there is discretionary. This is mostly expenditure on luxury items. So there is 3 types of household expenditure. Just remember these 3 things. An MCQ might be framed from this. Okay. And then we'll take a look at this picture. So it says that overall consumption expenditure is increasing. But the thing is, they said that the share of food expenditure in total expenditure was declining. And that is good news, because if the share of food expenditure is quite a lot in your total expenditure, that means you are poor, because poor people earn so little that 70 or 80% of their expenditure is on food items. But when you are rich, like Ambani's, okay, 0.00001% expenditure of yours is on food. Other expenditure is on other big shot luxury items, right? So if the share of your food expenditure is declining in your total expenditure, that is generally considered good news. Okay. Why? Very simply put, that means you are doing well. But the thing is that last year, share of food expenditure in both rural and urban India increased. So last 1 year has been bad, but overall India is in the right trajectory. Okay. That's all you need to know as far as this news item is concerned. Okay. Clear?